Welcome to Studio Conversations with Akiko Kotani. My name is Amanda Poss. I'm the Gallery Director of Gallery221 at HCC Dale Mabry campus. We're so thrilled to have all of you here with us virtually for our event tonight. Before I go to our artist, Akiko, I would like to turn this over to the Dean of the Associate in Arts, Dustin Lemke, for a few words of welcome from HCC. Dustin?
Hi, everyone. How are you? Dustin Lemke. I am the dean that oversees the gallery on our campus, but I've only been the dean for about 2 years. And back in 2016, Akiko had Soft Walls was installed here on the Dale Mabry campus. I was a faculty member. I liked to pop into the library, into the gallery when I had a chance. And I'll never forget, it was truly mesmerizing. You know, you see it from a distance and it looks luxurious and soft. It looked like, I don't know, an Afghan or something my grandma would have crocheted. And then I got up close and number one, you could smell the plastic and then you see the plastic and it didn't seem as soft. And it kind of freaked me out that it was plastic. And so I left kind of disturbed. And I love tonight that we played soft, soothing music. But my first reaction was I was a little disturbed by this. But it brought me back. And I kept coming back and standing in the room and visiting it. And I certainly think that that's what art is all about, that it challenges your mind, it challenges your senses even, and you come back. Since then, I've met Akiko at several of our gallery events. And she's the kindest person. I think she is, there's this peace that radiates from her. So I'm really excited tonight to get a peek into her process and her studio. So we're honored that you've shown your work here with us. We're honored that you're spending time with us tonight. So we appreciate it. Thank you to Amanda and her team for putting these amazing events together where we can't perhaps be with each other, but we can be with each other. So it's really lovely. You didn't have to drive across town in rush hour traffic, and you can sit maybe in your living room and get a look at this. So thank you, and thank you for everybody for being here. We really appreciate this. So I'm very excited. Welcome.
Thank you, Dustin. I also have a few words of thanks before I get to my conversation with Akiko. So first, I want to express my appreciation to the HCC Dale Mabry Campus Student Government Association for their long-standing contributions in support of the gallery. I also want to say thank you to our campus administration. That includes the HCC Dale Mabry Campus President, Dr. Alan Witt, and also Dustin Lemke, our dean, who you heard from. They're both wonderful and tireless advocates for the arts on our campus. I'm also very personally grateful for two people who are working behind the scenes tonight, Emiliano Sedekasi and Ashley Williams. They're my team at Gallery221, who I could not live without. Thank you both for everything that you do. And then thank you to our artist, Akiko Kotani. We're so thrilled to have you here with us tonight. So I'm going to talk to Akiko in a moment, but I want to take the opportunity to remind you, please ask questions for those of you who are just coming in to the event now. This is a conversation, so please put your questions into the chat throughout the event and we'll address them in the order in which they appear. So Akiko, you can go ahead and unmute and show us your video. And I'm going to invite you to talk a little bit about you and your work.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Amanda, for inviting me to this very unusual and not unusual for today's world, the Zoom meeting. And I would like to thank, of course, Dean Lemke, and everyone calls you Dustin, but Dean Lemke, I know that I've had several brief conversations with you in the gallery, and I certainly enjoy your comments about the work because you are not the first person that have been just, you know, really puzzled by the use of the plastic, and perhaps we'll have a chance to discuss it tonight. I have no idea. The questions that I was presented by Amanda was just, I could fill several hours talking about the work. but we have to be disciplined. And I told Amanda to just cut me short if I keep rambling on, because that is not fun to hear. But I really thank you, Amanda, and not only for this opportunity, but I also have invited several of my friends, and they are tuning in from several parts of the United States, which is very exciting. And also to thank you for, your wonderful efforts for highlighting the arts in the Tampa Bay area. You've done such a wonderful job educating your students. And as you know, I was a professor for many years, and that's something very dear to my heart. Now, I think you wanted to know that about my background. Is that one of the questions?
Yes. So tell us a little bit about your formal education and training, just a quick little bit about the background, the context for your work. Then we'll get to the meat of the questions.
All right. I was born in Waipahu, Hawaii, someplace that is really diametrically opposed in geographic location from Florida, but very similar in many things, in spirit and in weather. And I feel very comfortable here. I received my BFA in painting and art history from the University of Hawaii. And if I fast forward to my 20s, I spent it in New York City. Then in my 30s, I studied weaving in Guatemala with Mayan Indians in San Antonio, Aguascalientes. I then took this inspiration back with me to the United States, and I studied fibers at Tyler School of Art in Philadelphia. And through our question and answer session, I can certainly flesh out for you the two areas of my interest, my BFA in painting and my MFA in fibers, because they do intersect. And hopefully right at the moment, they intersect very naturally.
That gave me the perfect segue there, Akiko. You're so practiced at this for my next question. So the evolution of your work to the crocheted installations, for which you are very well known, evolved slowly. You've mentioned your formal training in traditional fine art media and processes, starting with, as you told me earlier, a focus on drawing on paper, that then led to this idea of drawing on silk organza with stitching. So tell us about that journey and what brought you from traditional drawing to drawing with fabrics and fiber and stitching in more of these craft-based processes.
Well, I tell you, you've asked a very complex question, and I will do my best.
Everything.
Perhaps we can break it down in, further discussions later on. But for me, it was a very natural process. You see, my mother always had handwork on her lap, where she exercised her creative energies in doing projects for comfort and, for care. She was a very lovely and a very caring mother. And that was, her way to exercise her creative energies, and mine was to draw. Now, the sudden fascination I had for Guatemalan weaving was totally integrated into my artwork as I began to see, quotes, my soft works, my artworks as soft. For instance, I saw an exhibition of Richard Serra's Corten steel at the Byler Museum in Switzerland. You know, it was so masculine, so formal, and filled the space in a way that I wondered, how would it look, in quotes, soft? When I was presented with a grant by the Pittsburgh Foundation and the Heinz Endowment to create a work that pushed my creative boundaries, I thought of making this hard sculpture, so to speak, soft. Working with crochet in an unconventional material of plastic gave this work additional dimensions. The crocheted matter implicated woman's work, and the plastic gave the work a quickened sense of excess in the environment. They all seemed to blend into what I wanted to present.
It's so lovely and poetic. I'm just like letting that kind of soak in. You mentioned this grant, but I want to talk about it in a bit more detail. So in 2012, you were one of 10 select artists awarded a $10,000 grant called Investing in Professional Artists. And that was sponsored, as you mentioned, by the Heinz Foundation and the Pittsburgh Foundation in Pennsylvania. In our conversations, you described this as a grant that encouraged artists to use the funds to take risks, to do things that they might not have done otherwise in their studio. And that eventually led to your installation, Soft Walls. So many people are afraid to take risks and to have the confidence to even apply for opportunities sometimes. But this seems like it was such an important and transformative opportunity for you. What gave you the motivation to take advantage of this grant, very prestigious grant opportunity, and then the inspiration to develop your work in this way?
You know, it's a wonderful question, and it's really a question about taking risks. Mm-hmm. And, you know, as artists, we like to think ourselves as taking risks. But if we really search our souls, if we really look at ourselves, we tend to stick to what is known. We tend to stick with what we usually do. And I am not, you know, I'm the same way. I was a professor of art. I taught art for 21 years, and I did everything that was to do with going up the ranks of being a professor, and it was really a very full-time job. Now, as you mentioned, it was 2010, this grant was offered, and it was to take chances that an artist had never done before. And I thought there was this haunting image in my mind that I wanted to create. And I decided that when I heard about this grant, it was a great opportunity. However, speaking of risks, when I went to the announcement, I remember it was held in the Warhol Auditorium. There were over 250 artists in this auditorium with standing room only, and they were to offer only 10 grants. And I thought, I will never get this grant. This is crazy. You must be out of your mind. But you see, you must take the risk. You have to, you know, absolutely go for it. When something is presented to you, you have to go for it and do the best you can. And lo and behold, I got the grant. So it was a great outcome for me.
Well, a lot of people would have stepped into that room, and you described it as being like packed to the rafters, right? Over 200 people there, at this point feeling very, very small in a way, in this
yes.
people, a lot of people wouldn't they would have taken that and been like, I don't know, I can't do this. What did you find, what did that kind of searching within yourself to have that motivation to go ahead and apply?
Well, I have been, as I told you before, just, going along, being an artist and doing one thing after the other and doing things that I was very familiar with and I felt very safe with. And I did not want to do anything other than that because my work was being, accepted in that light. This was a totally different area. It was a totally different area to take a risk in. I mean, doing crochet in such large scale, that in itself was quite an adventure. And immediately when you see crochet, you think of woman's work. So there is that heavy overlay of woman's work on this piece. Also, as your dean, really just wonderfully, I think, described, it really makes people angry when they see this much plastic. They think about all the plastic in the ocean and they're puzzled. They really cannot place where it belongs. This work does not belong anywhere in the right places, in the right categories, in all of art. When I did it, believe me, I was very innocent, but I did not start out to do a piece that made people upset or questioned. Not at all. It was that I saw this image, I saw this vision, and I just moved as an artist, I moved toward it. And when I decided that I was going to take a risk, I just simply went for it. I didn't stop. That doesn't mean that in the 2.5 years that it took me to produce this work, that I didn't have my doubts. I did. Well, once a week, I would say to myself, I think this is crazy. What are you doing? This is nuts. But I simply, persisted. And the outcome, Amanda, is just so wonderful. This work has been shown in 7 places, in Austin, Texas, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And in this Tampa Bay area, it's been shown at your gallery and at the museum in St. Petersburg, and also at Creative Pinellas. They presented it in a very beautiful setting with another work that perhaps we can talk about, and it is called The Waterfalls of Milford.
Yeah, we're going to get to that one in just a moment. You're so good with laying those little seeds for the segue. But I want to talk a little bit more about soft walls because, selfish, that's what was shown at Gallery221, which Emiliano has been sharing on the screen there. As you mentioned, it's quite large. For those of you who maybe haven't visited our space, the gallery is about 33 feet wide. And so this installation, those beautiful drapes of crocheted plastic are very, very large. And to the scale of your human body, they're very encompassing. So can you tell us a little bit more about that project? Like why use plastic? Of all the things that you could have used to crochet, why plastic? Is there anything particular about the process as well you can tell us with the crocheting? It's very involved, very connected to the hand. And maybe how it's evolved over these 7 showings that the installation has had.
Yes. As I said, I did have an image that really wanted to give birth. That's the only way that I can describe it. It was festering in me for years. And I cannot say that it was totally in the image that it ended up to be. As we know as artists, we start somewhere, and as we work, we discover things along the way, we experiment with different materials, and we simply continue. Now, I wanted, as you remember, this work to be soft. And to be soft, I thought it would be wonderful to crochet this. Now, what kind of material could I use that would give me the scale that I had in mind? And so I thought, and I could afford. I mean, I did have this enormous grant, but it wasn't only the plastic that I had to purchase, but I had to be sure that the construction of the inner matrix, the wooden matrix that's not seen, is always constructed when it is, sighted. In every place that it has been shown, I was really given very generous grants and was provided with enough labor to construct the inner matrix, the wooden matrix. And so I experimented with various materials, fabric materials, but the plastic was really what I began to think was the best material. It was just absolutely the right color, the right texture. And obviously, if I crocheted it, it had to be a very exaggerated stitch, very large. And so it evolved really to be this particular material, and it happened to be 45-gallon white plastic bags, garbage bags. And so that's what I did. I simply sliced up the garbage bags, made a linear material, and started to crochet.
More recently, you were invited back to HCC for an exhibition in January 2019 at Gallery221 at the Ybor City campus, and you showed another crocheted installation called The Waterfalls of Milford Valley. In your statement, you write that this was inspired by the experience of traveling to New Zealand and being surrounded by hundreds of thin waterfalls in this location, Milford Valley. But also that you were likewise inspired by the gallery itself as this ideal space to showcase the new work. Can you describe that experience in New Zealand for us and how it led to the installation?
Yes. I had not anticipated the waterfalls, but what I remember was driving through this valley, this beautiful valley, and it was raining. The valley had two sides to it that were very high. And as we drove through the valley, it was about 2 hours of driving in the bus. Just miles and miles and miles of thin waterfalls falling from both sides of the valley. It left such an impression on me that I thought, I must somehow express this in an artwork. This is where my trouble begins with these large works, when I become inspired by an experience. And so it festers in my image field, I call it, and it stays there until I see the right combination of things. Now, for this Waterfalls of Milford Valley, tall and skinny falls, Carolyn Kosar invited me to view her gallery, And we're looking at this beautiful, tall space. And immediately I told her, I know exactly the work for this space. It's Waterfalls of Milford Valley. And so she said, okay, let's do it. And of course, you know, this work is large. It's 20 feet high by 20 feet wide. And it falls and it cascades on the floor. I would say the dimension on the floor would be, I usually say it's 13 feet, but it's really much larger than that. It just simply falls and it cascades on the floor. It was shown here, and it was also shown at Creative Pinellas at the gallery there.
So several bodies of work in your oeuvre have this often quiet yet rich connection with nature and the human experience. For example, in series that showed in our slideshow as we led to the start of this event called Grass. This draws its form from the environment, but also speaks to various stages in life. So can you maybe expand on this example and how your work connects so deeply with nature, and examples like this in the Waterfalls of Milford Valley, which we just discussed?
Now, this work, Tender Grass, Golden Grass, and Burnt Grass, is a series of, this is stitched silk on silk organza in 3 layers. And it really is simple. Yes, it's taken from my environment. In Western Pennsylvania, I had a beautiful studio. And to take a break, I went outdoors to walk on the grass. And on the side of the grass, on the side of the mowed grass, there were some wild grass. And I thought, oh my goodness, really interesting lines. You know, I just love to draw, and I love to draw lines. And so went back to my studio and I got my sketchbook, and I did a number of sketches on these little capsules of pictures of grass. And then I decided that I would love to do a series of this, what I would call the grass series. And as I developed it, I wanted it to be about stages of life. Tender Grass happens to be about when someone is very young and tender, and you know, still very innocent. And as you can see, the colors are lighter. The forms are graceful, and they're you know, very soft and very tender. And also there's a feeling of vulnerability to the work. Golden Grass is about the stage that I am in right now. I'm older, I'm experienced. I have had some life experiences, and you know, really at the moment I'm enjoying my my so-called age. So this is Golden Grass. Now, burnt grass has another connotation to it. Burnt grass is about my Asian culture. Now, after I die, and after you know, people in my Asian community die, we are cremated. And this is about my cremation, and you know, really the ashes dancing about. Now, I don't mean to be macabre or anything like that. It isn't that. It is really about life after death, that there is such a thing, and that is also a belief in my Buddhist understanding.
You're balancing such big ideas, right, that are fundamental to our experience of being humans in the world, and then doing this with such a beautiful, restrained, and minimalist approach that it's really quite breathtaking, lovely. And I see a lot of people gushing over these in the chat section. I want to talk about that minimalist application, because we see this in your work throughout, whether it's the stitched pieces like we just saw, or the larger crocheted installations. Even though they're quite large, there is this refinement, this economy of line and color. What draws you to that kind of approach to art making?
You ask these very deep questions. Amanda.
Draws it out, Akiko.
Amanda, I have, you know, heard and seen you do this before, and you do it so well. That really goes to the heart of my art making, because I feel that by being restrained, it really has to do about restraint. Now, you know, we talk about minimalism, but rarely do you ever hear an artist talk about the restraint that is used. Now, say an artist like Agnes Martin, for instance, her use of restraint is just breathtaking. And we don't really hear very much said about that. But it is that restraint of energy, in my opinion, that gives power to the work. And that is really, has been something that is present, I believe, throughout my work. It isn't something that I started out to, you know, to have in my work. I just found along the way that it's there, and people respond to it, and they don't quite understand what it is they're responding to. But I think that it might be some insight into what is going on. You can tell me, Amanda, or your chat people can also respond to
well, I love that line you said about restraint lending a sort of power. I think, you know, it's such a lovely metaphor for life. There's so many things that are going on in our day-to-day lives, and we might have this impulse to like throw everything at it, but there's something powerful in a singular gesture done with intention and done with a lot of thought, right? So, and I think that comes out really in a beautiful way in your work. I want to talk now a little bit more about your process and what we began this conversation with, because I think it's very interesting in the way you overlap this formal sensibility that comes from drawing and more formal aspects of art making. So dealing with proportion, surface texture, economy of line, space, and then balancing that with fiber. You know, we have processes like stitching and weaving, crocheting. These all have this very intimate familiarity. We interact with fibers in our everyday lives. You mentioned your mother with her fiber work being kind of fundamental for you as well. So how do you balance these two sensibilities, and how do each play a role in the way meaning is constructed in your work?
Well, I wish I could answer your question about how I do it. That is a question that I really don't know. I see, the only way I can answer you, Amanda, is that I see images and I see it in fiber, in soft materials, and I see it stitched. Now, people that are familiar with my work and that I have shown with Leslie Curran at her beautiful gallery in St. Petersburg, know that I do works with ink and brush, and I do works with pencil on paper, as well as stitching. And so I do works with other media. But for the present moment, I do see quite a bit of images that are stitched, hand done. I really imagine the work with those materials and that process. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, in many ways. I think there's a strong sense of instinct I sense that goes in your work, but informed by your experiences and your education. It just kind of comes together in this moment. I want to speak a little bit broadly now about working through difficult times. This is something on, I think, most people's minds right now. And we first discussed this question, we were, of course, thinking about COVID-19 and quarantine and, you know, how do you stay productive in this new environment? But now there's this collective turmoil and trauma with the murders of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and others that are going on. Artists are no strangers to adversity. And so I'm hoping you can share with us some of the ways that you have found to overcome challenges and adversity in your own life.
Well, that is really quite a question because as you know, as I said before, I spent 21 years as a professor. And I was a professor in Western Pennsylvania, which is in the Rust Belt. I was for many years at my university, the only Asian woman. And I did, in fact, face many of the issues that are faced by, people that are having such difficulties today. And so I have great feeling for what they are going through. And I understand what they're going through. We're always saying, well, you don't really know what we're going through. Well, of course you don't, because you're not in our skin. You're not in our bodies. Of course you don't know what we're going through. And, that's fine. That's how I feel about that. But it is true that, the people that are going through the difficulties today, it is a very, very trying time. But for some odd reason, with all of the protests that are going on today, I have great faith and hope that something will come from it.
You've talked to me before about the importance of writing and journaling and how that has, for a long time, also informed your practice. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yes, I can. And also I can say with much confidence and love that my husband, Bernie Freidberg, who taught philosophy when I met him at my university where I taught, Slippery Rock University, he really taught me how to write. I have a learning disability and I really did not know how to write, and he taught me how to write. And I found that by writing, it does something to quicken the mind. It really helps you to see different images in different ways. I mean, the way that I interpret the world is through images. The way that my husband interprets the world is through words. And I had to learn from him about the way that he sees the world, as well as, my teaching him about seeing the world through images. And so I would say that this was another dimension of education, I think, that is so wonderful, that we have these various avenues of expression, of art, which is so important, of writing, of thinking, of analyzing, of, learning to do math and everything else. It's just, our liberal arts is just so important. We really must, absolutely must support this.
It's a lovely sort of rallying cry at the end there. And for the importance of education, and that education is lifelong. We have some students in the audience, right? And I think that's so important to say out loud. It doesn't end with being in the classroom. It's a constant journey and evolution. I'd like to now open up to questions from our audience. So if you haven't had a chance yet to type your question into the chat, I encourage you to do so now. So Ashley Williams, our gallery assistant, has been monitoring those questions as they've come in, and will give us our first question for the night.
Hello. So thank you all for your questions and comments. We're going to share them in the order, the order that they came in. So please, of course, continue to share your questions. So our first question for Akiko is, did you use recycled plastic in your work?
I use recycled plastic in Waterfalls of Milford Valley. I did in this way. I had several samples that I did of other works in the same type of plastic, and I simply undid those works and I redid the plastic for this work. But it is not recycled plastic in the way that the person or the person asking the question may think it is. It is a recycled plastic of some of my work.
Thank you. So our second question is, does Akiko do all the crocheting herself, or does she engage helpers?
Oh,
Question, Akiko.
I wish I had helpers. I do it all myself. Believe me, I've had fantasies of having whole workshops of people doing my work for me. But as of this moment, I have not engaged anyone but myself to do my work.
You know, as you said, Akiko, I think that's many artists' fantasies to have a workshop, and that's worth saying again out loud for students in the audience in particular. Think of a lot of the old masters as being the ones that made the whole painting, but of course they had a guy who did the backgrounds, a guy who good at hands and fabric, and they did different parts. But I particularly love that your hand is in every stitch, every crochet. I think that speaks to the time and labor of art. I think we too often in the arts realm hear things like, oh, my kid could do that, or what makes it so special, right? But there is such an investment from you, not only in the research and the experimentation and the thought process that goes into it before you've even picked up the material. But these are, again, large installations, and you've done every little bit of it.
I could say something about the stitching. As I do my stitches, they vary from day to day. They vary from time to time. It really is a diary of how I am feeling, how I am thinking, what I'm going throughout that particular period in my life. It is all there. The stitches are all uneven, and I particularly like the fact that it is uneven. It is handmade, and a product that is handmade shows this vulnerability of a person's inner working. Every stitch has a signature of where I was at that moment in time. And so it does have that, ideation to it. But I must say that I have lots of helpers. In other words, I have people that do design work for me, that do my website design for me. I have people that do the inner matrix working for me. I really am not very good at carpentry, but they do that for me. The lining, the sewing of the linings, I find a very good seamstress, and they do the linings for me. And then of course I have my most favorite Robin at the Leslie Curran. She does a great deal of work for me, you know, in trying to get my other work, not this particular type of work, but other work out for me to sell. So I have a lot of help.
It's wonderful. Thank you for responding to that. The next question.
Yes, thank you. So this is our last question right now. Referring to the waterfalls of Milford Valley, did you let the ends of the falls fall naturally, or did you place the ends of the falls deliberately on the floor?
Well, both questions I did naturally and deliberately, because the falls were long and the only place it could go is to fall on the floor. And so I hope that that answers the question, but I designed it that way. I wanted to puddle on the floor. That was part of the whole concept.
I know that was our last question, but we've had so many lovely shout outs in the chat section. I don't know if you've been following them, Akiko. Someone who said that they studied under you in university, made them the artist and maker that they are today. I also like this comment from Teresa about the use of plastic to represent natural forces being really powerful. And they mentioned that plastic has this repellent and then attractive quality. We've all tried to like open a trash bag, right? And you get that static. But then when paired with this idea of water, gravity, nature, they said it speaks, or it sparks a kind of power, infinity of nature.
Wonderful. It's great.
We do have, I think, one question that's come in. Ashley, I'll go ahead and grab this one since I'm in the chat already. From Deborah saying that they love the way you speak, describe your work, your inspirations and execution. Please tell us what it is in the future for your work at this moment and what it is that gives you hope for the future. Really great question.
That's a wonderful question, Deborah. I am hopeful because we as human beings somehow, you know, are able to come up with solutions. And I am very hopeful in that sense, although I am very aware of history and of civilizations that have destroyed themselves. And we are really facing, I believe, a very serious juncture in our lives. And we have to take care. We have to take care of each other, and we have to take care of, you know, our environment. It is really very, very, very important. As far as the works that I see for myself, I am imagining in my image field some work that has to do with the color black. I already have finished a work that is red. And so these works are much more, I would say, impactful in emotion. And I think that that is about all that I would say about it right now.
It's a nice like little hint and teaser. So I'd encourage everyone in our audience to make sure you're following Akiko on her website, akikokotani.com, so you can stay up to date with all of her new work. So this, I think that's our final question. So I'm gonna go ahead and conclude. Thank you, Akiko, for all of your brilliant insights, thoughts, sharing so generously of your experiences with us. We're so appreciative to not only have had you in both of the galleries at HCC, but here with us virtually tonight. Thank you so much. We're going to end tonight's event by replaying the slideshow that we had at the beginning with artworks by Akiko. And if you want to follow us for any new announcements, when we'll have, of course, this recording available, you can follow us at Gallery221 HCC on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. So thank you all so much for being here with us tonight. Take care and be well.
Thank you.